Hearing will come to order. Today, the committee meets again for a remote hearing via video. A few video conference reminders. Once you start speaking, there will be a slight delay before you are displayed on the screen. To minimize background noise, please click the mute button until it is your turn to speak or ask questions. If there's a technology issue, we'll move to the next senator until we resolve the issue. The 5-minute clock still applies. You should all have one box on your screen labeled clock that will show how much time is remaining. And with 30 seconds remaining, I will try to remember to gently tap the gavel to remind senators that their time has almost expired. And to simplify the speaking order process, we will simply go by seniority. First, I want to thank the chairman, Chairman Crapo, for scheduling this very important hearing. He cannot be with us at this time because he has another commitment on another committee on which he serves. And so he asked me to fill in for him, and I'm pleased to do that. I also want to take a moment to thank Senator Brown. Ranking Member Brown was very helpful in enabling us to put together, especially this very, very impressive lineup of witnesses, and I'm grateful to Senator Brown for his cooperation. The purpose of the hearing is to conduct oversight on the current U.S. policy to address the crisis in Hong Kong, the administration's responses so far, and what additional legal authorities and other tools Congress may consider providing to complement that response. The Chinese Communist Party in Beijing has been waging an aggressive and systematic campaign that seems designed to eliminate the distinction between the freedoms enjoyed by the people of Hong Kong versus the absence of those freedoms on mainland China. Let's be clear, the Chinese Communist Party wants to bring the people of Hong Kong to heel, lest mainlanders decide that they want some of those freedoms themselves. For decades, Hong Kong has been an amazing place to live. I had the pleasure to live in Hong Kong for a year back in 1991. The people of Hong Kong are very special people. It's a very special place, and largely because of the basic freedoms that the people of Hong Kong have enjoyed: freedom of assembly, a free press, freedom of speech, an independent judiciary, a partially democratic electoral system of government. And because these freedoms have included economic freedom as well, in fact, Hong Kong is one of the freest economies in the world. Hong Kong has been one of the most prosperous societies on the planet, that despite the fact that it's essentially a small rock in the water with no natural resources other than a harbor. Now it seems that the Chinese Communist Party is undermining these freedoms. Over 8,000 protesters have been arrested for peacefully demonstrating since last year. Independent booksellers have been shut down. Independent media outlets harassed. Pro-democracy electoral candidates disqualified, intervention in Hong Kong school curriculum, and even the kidnapping of Hong Kong citizens. It's chilling that today, on the 31st anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, these offensives seem to be culminating in a new piece of legislation being imposed from the mainland onto Hong Kong. This so-called national security bill that will make it unlawful to have any dissent in Hong Kong. You know, it's quite possible that thousands of peaceful protesters were killed in Tiananmen Square in 1989 on this day for one reason. They were dissenting against the Chinese Communist Party's authoritarian rule, and they were advocating for a representative government elected by its people. The Chinese Communist Party's national security legislation would destroy the one country, two system arrangement that they had committed to. This legislation criminalizes, among other things, subversion that many people in Hong Kong believe will be used really to stifle dissent. Hong Kongers could face arbitrary arrest and long prison sentences merely for speaking their minds. Independent media voices shuttered. Beijing censorship and surveillance is likely to grow. And the causes for Hong Kong's financial and economic success could wither, as some of the reasons that make Hong Kong such an attractive place to work and do business will erode with the erosion of freedom and autonomy. Chinese Communist Party's campaign should not be surprising. Principles such as freedom and transparency and the just rule of law are antithetical to the Communist Party's mission. Look at some of the other behavior that the Chinese Communist Party has engaged in: treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, aggression towards neighbors in the South China Sea, being dishonest to the world about the COVID pandemic, and the unbelievable effort to control the behavior of its own 1.3 billion citizens through this so-called social credit system. They are tweaking and prodding people's behavior using an Orwellian system of advanced technology to surveil, censor, and punish and reward people. All of this with respect to Hong Kong, in spite of the Chinese Communist Party's obligation from the 1984 international treaty with the UK, which was called the Joint Declaration, that is registered at the United Nations. This treaty set out the Chinese Communist Party's obligation for when Hong Kong passed from the UK's control back to the Chinese governments. And it established that Hong Kong would have, and I quote, a high degree of autonomy, and that its citizens would enjoy many of the basic rights and freedoms that we have in the United States. But now many fear that the Chinese Communist Party's Orwellian system on the mainland could be the future of Hong Kong. I recently introduced with my colleague, Senator Van Hollen, I want to thank him for his leadership in this area. We introduced a bill that's designed to push back on the Chinese Communist Party's aggression and make those responsible think twice about continuing to quash Hong Kongers' basic freedoms. It's called the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, and it targets entities that inhibit Hong Kongers' freedom of speech, press and assembly, independent judiciary, democratic processes, and the high degree of autonomy that was promised to the people of Hong Kong. Notably, the bill also penalizes the banks that choose to finance the erosion of Hong Kong's autonomy and put marginal profits ahead of basic human rights. This would be an unprecedented action towards the Chinese Communist officials, and it is intended to create obstacles to that aggression and obstacles that the leadership in Beijing has not encountered before. The bill has a tailored approach to sanctioning bad actors. There's a delayed on-ramp before sanctions become mandatory, and there's a clear off-ramp by which entities can avoid the sanctions. There's bipartisan interest in getting legislation like this done as soon as possible. Chinese Communist Party must know that there are consequences to its actions. Otherwise, the lesson that they will conclude is that they can continue the aggression against Hong Kong and perhaps in other places around the world.